I never saw it coming. It was a typical Thursday evening when I came home to find Ronan in the kitchen. A strange silence between us. He didn't greet me as usual with that crooked smile, the one that always made my heart skip a beat. No, today, he just stood there, chopping vegetables with an intensity I didn't recognize. "Hey, babe," I said, setting down my purse, trying to break the tension. He didn't respond. His back remained turned to me, his broad shoulders rigid, like a statue. I stepped closer. "Is everything all right?" He paused, knife hovering over a carrot. He slowly turned his head to glance at me. His eyes, those deep, kind eyes that had once made me feel safe, now looked distant, cold. "I'm fine," he muttered, his voice flat, almost mechanical. I swallowed, confusion creeping in. Something was off. This wasn't the Ronan I knew, not the man who always asked how my day went, who kissed me goodnight even when I was annoyed with him. Tried to laugh it off. "You're acting weird. What's going on?" He didn't respond, just continued slicing the carrots with surgical precision. The silence grew unbearable. Something was wrong, something deep, but I couldn't figure out what it was. "Ronan," I said, my voice sharper now. "Talk to me." His head snapped up, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of something, anger, fear. But it was gone in an instant. "I'm just tired, Zuri," he said, his tone more forceful now. "Go relax. I'll finish dinner." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly off. It was like the man I'd shared a life with for the past 6 years had just vanished, and in his place stood a stranger. I backed away, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. "Okay, I'll just be in the living room." That night, Ronan didn't join me on the couch like usual. He didn't even sit beside me at dinner. He ate in silence, his eyes never meeting mine, his fork tapping the plate in a way that made my skin crawl. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept tossing and turning, my mind racing, trying to piece together the puzzle of what had happened. I had no idea what was wrong, but I knew something was wrong. Deep down, I could feel it in my bones. The next day, things didn't get any better. Ronan was still silent, distant. His eyes, once so full of warmth, now looked hollow, like there was something buried deep inside him, something dark. I tried to reach out, tried to talk to him, but he brushed me off. His responses were short, clipped, and he seemed to be avoiding me at all costs. It was like we were living in two different worlds, and I had no idea what had caused the divide. It wasn't just that he was silent. There was something else in his behavior, something dangerous. I watched him one evening as he stared at the clock, his face unreadable. He wasn't cooking this time. He wasn't even looking at his phone. He was just staring, as if waiting. The clock ticked on, the seconds dragging like hours. Then suddenly he stood up, walked to the door, and left the house. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I follow him? Should I give him space? But something inside me told me that this was the moment I would find out what was happening. I grabbed my coat, slipped out the door, and followed him at a distance. Ronan didn't go to the usual places. He didn't go to work. He didn't go to the gym. Instead, he made his way down streets I'd never seen him walk before, through alleys and deserted corners of the city I didn't even recognize. I kept my distance, heart pounding in my chest, afraid he might turn around and see me, but also terrified of what I might find. Eventually, he stopped in front of an old rundown building. It was dark, the windows covered in grime. There was a single light flickering in the distance. He knocked on the door. I froze. A voice from inside answered, muffled but clear. "It's you. Come in." I couldn't hear the rest of the conversation, but I saw Ronan's shadow slip inside the building. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, My thoughts jumbled. I had to know what was going on. I couldn't just leave him in there. So I crept closer, moving as silently as possible, hoping to find a window or a crack in the door where I could hear. What was he doing? Who was he meeting? After a few minutes, I found a small window. I peeked through the grime-covered glass, my breath catching in my throat. Ronan was sitting at a table with another man. The man was tall, wearing a dark suit, and his face was shadowed by the dim light. But his posture, his confidence, was unsettling. "Is everything in place?" man asked. His voice was low, too low for me to fully hear, but I felt the weight of his words. Ronan nodded. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something darker, something dangerous. "It's all set," Ronan replied. His voice was cold, emotionless. My heart stopped. What was going on? What had happened to my husband? I watched them for another few minutes, my body trembling. But then something caught my eye. A car. A sleek black vehicle rolled into the alley. The man in the suit stood up and moved toward the car. Ronan followed him, still silent, his expression unreadable. The car door opened. I barely managed to hold in a gasp. A woman stepped out of the car. Her hair was dark, long and straight. Her eyes gleamed in the moonlight. And when she smiled, I felt a chill run down my spine. She was beautiful. And the way Ronan looked at her, it was like nothing I had ever seen. I knew it. Something was happening. Something had been happening all along. Without thinking, I turned and ran. I didn't know what I was going to do with this information. I didn't know how to handle what I had just seen. But one thing was clear. Ronan was hiding something from me. The next few days were a blur. I didn't confront him. I didn't know how. I kept quiet, pretending that everything was normal, pretending that I hadn't seen what I'd seen. But every time I looked at him, I felt that coldness, that distance. I knew he was lying. But what was he hiding? And who was that woman? The silence between us grew heavier. It became unbearable. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth. One night, after dinner, I finally confronted him. "Ronan," I said, my voice shaking. "I know what you're hiding. I saw you with her." He didn't react at first. He just stared at me, his face completely unreadable. Then after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "You shouldn't have seen her," he said, his voice cold. "But it's too late now." "What is this?" I demanded, tears welling up in my eyes. "Who is she? What's going on?" Ronan stood up and walked toward the window, his back to me. "I've been trying to protect you, Zuri," he said quietly, almost to himself. "From the truth. From what's coming." My heart raced. What truth? He turned around then, his face twisted in a way I'd never seen before, like he was in pain. "I'm not who you think I am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And that's when it hit me. The truth that I had been running from, the truth that had been staring me in the face all along. Ronan wasn't just my husband. He was involved in something dangerous, something that could destroy everything. "I've been trying to keep you safe," he said, stepping closer to me. "But it's too late now." And with those words, everything changed. The world I knew, the world I thought I had control over, shattered into a million pieces. I never saw my husband the same way again.